Yeah, I was talking to Maria last night. So, and then it occurred to me that they have facilities. So
Yeah, you're thinking about maybe indoor meetings for Rotary at the Eagle Room at Wind River Casino.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah,
They do a pretty good job with food too.
they do.
yeah.
Yeah,
Hard to find around.
it's a longer drive to get down there for most people, but
Yeah, she's gonna check the capacity at the Hilton too.
oh, good, that's right.
So, because yeah, I thought of that that may be,
Yeah, the Hilton's right around the corner from where we normally meet, so
yeah. But
bring it.
yes, it will be nice to be back to normal-ish. So Todd, flights,
Yeah,
where are those at?
Well, so Burbank starts in less than a month now, and I've not looked at the prices. They're introductory, so some people have been like, they're not $19, they're introductory, but they're still going to be cheap. They're probably going to stay, if you don't add any add-ons, will probably stay around the $50 mark in perpetuity. That's their goal. That's the way they work, because it's a 189 passenger plane, the largest commercial plane to ever have consistent service in and out of Reading that I'm aware of. 100, it's pretty big. So yeah, May 20th is the first flight. And I think we're planning a little party. We were planning the party for Alaska already, and then Avelo announced their start date. We knew they were coming, but not sure when. And so they're going to beat Alaska to the punch, but they're flying south, of course. So lots of parties at the airport over the next 2 months.
Nice. And then where's Alaska flying?
Alaska's flying to Seattle.
Okay.
So Eric and I are on the first flight on Friday morning, June 18th, up there for the weekend, $95 each way for each of us.
Wow.
That's Father's Day weekend, isn't it, Todd?
Father's Day, yeah. So we're gonna go up there. No kids, so what a way to spend Father's Day. But yeah, it'll be fun. Just I don't know what's open in Seattle, but it'll be nice to get away for the weekend and take that first flight. It's only, I think it's like an hour and 30 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
And then
awesome.
more next year. Hopefully by the end of this year, we'll know if we get Denver. Probably by August, if we get a Denver direct flight with United. So lots of good, and it's people coming in too. It's not just our folks going out. It's like the Burbank,
Right.
it's people from the LA basin getting to Reading. So I expect our tourism numbers to continue to increase. And now that we're going to have a new tourism contract holder in the Reading Chamber of Commerce, they're just going to go through the roof.
I'm super excited about the connection to Hollywood and the film commission piece and everything too.
Yeah.
And then also there was another thing too about, you notice all the hotels that are currently under construction in our community, which also bodes well for TOT tax and that type of thing. So
Yeah. Hey, I just want to say good morning to the people that have logged in. We're waiting, sorry, Todd, we're waiting for a few more. Obviously, we're a few minutes before 9 o'clock right now. We will get started on time for you guys because I know everyone is extremely busy. But in the meantime, feel free to enjoy our idle chatter while we fill the next 4 minutes with news from the EDC and the chamber and what's going on in our community.
I'll give you
carry on.
fun stuff that goes across channels, and that would be the Asphalt Cowboys media luncheon was yesterday, and they were excited to announce that Reading Rodeo Week is returning this year. So I think it's May 7th through the 15th this year, and pancake breakfast tickets went on sale today.
Okay.
And those Asphalt Cowboys will be all throughout the community selling them for $5 a pop. The breakfast itself will take place at the Civic Auditorium in the parking lot this year. It was the best way that they could accommodate the crowds and also the COVID regulations. So anyway, pretty cool that we're able to make that happen this year, and it's such a great tradition.
Yeah, definitely. I know we're a rodeo sponsor every year, and in talking with them, they did a lot of work with Shasta County and public health to make sure that they could have it again, but be within the guidelines. And so changes, but good to have it back.
Yeah. I can walk to the pancake breakfast from my office. So
I think, oh, that's right. I think I think this year's theme is honky tonk bars and rodeo stars.
And Todd, we would all like just reserved parking for the pancake breakfast in your parking lot as well.
Yeah, no, that works. O2 has a VIP spot here anytime, so in the chamber does as well.
Fantastic. So what else is new?
What I was going to say about hotels is Shasta City is also going to be getting a hotel. I don't know if they'll break ground this year or not. I need to check in with Reading Rancheria Economic Development, but they're building a hotel up there, either I think breaking ground this year or next year. So there's going to be a Hilton brand hotel on the east end of town, close to I-5, with a whole some other retail that's going to be there as well. So that's going to be a big upgrade for Shasta Lake City to have a real deal hotel. Not to take light of I think it's the Shasta Dam Motel up there, but it'll be nice to have some other options for travelers.
Yep.
Fantastic. All right, we've got about 1 minute left. We've got some more people logging in, so we'll give them time to jump on the webinar, and then we'll get started with our introductions. And we should have a pretty full house today, because everybody loves hearing from Jen and all the good news that she always brings to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trying to think of what else is new and exciting in our community without going into politics. Striking out.
Well, the parking garage in downtown is nearly completed. I mean, I guess that's a kind of a very optimistic statement. It's actually going to be completed probably by the end of this year, but it's they're like on the 4th floor of it right now. So that's pretty exciting. The steam whistle about 1 block away will actually be shooting out CO2 at the top of it on Fridays at 5 o'clock starting in late May. There's
That's awesome.
an event in late May. And then finally, the State of the City this year, rather than having it at the Civic Auditorium, it's going to be at the Cascade Theater. And then we're going to have a block party in downtown Reading. And the Chamber is partnering with Viva Downtown on the event this year. So that should be really fun. And hopefully a lot of people will be able to be a part of the festivities that in the past haven't been able to.
That's awesome. When does the State of the City, typically September?
It's typically September, but we are shooting for October 1st. It's the first Friday of the month, and first Fridays in downtown, the businesses stay open later, and we thought that would give them maybe a little publicity and help that to continue to move forward. So should be pretty fun.
Awesome. And you guys are still doing grants, right? There's a restaurant one that just came out.
Yeah, there's that restaurant revitalization fund from the SBA. And I think Todd, you sent out an email yesterday about that. So maybe you should take that.
Well, the information is forthcoming, but the SBA reached out to me, I think, to get kind of a different audience than some of their partners they usually are working with. And we're going to be doing a webinar with the SBA Regional Deputy Director, Carrie Ellen Wood, on Tuesday, May 11th at 3 p.m. that the EDC will be co-hosting with several other people. And it's not just going to be Shasta County. It'll actually be Siskiyou, Trinity, Modoc, and Shasta County to reach all the restaurants. And there's a lot of webinars with the SBDC and the Women's Business Center. And then we'll have that one directly with the SBA, with the Deputy Director to talk more about the funds. There'll be 21 days before the funds go out to everybody for women, veterans, minority-owned businesses, restaurants specifically, to get access to that $26 billion available for restaurants. So there's a lot of people. I think there's a webinar today with the SBDC, and there'll be more leading up to the initial rollout.
Awesome.
Pretty
All right. Oh, go ahead.
thing on that, Michelle, is just that I'm really happy that the government is focusing on the smaller operators on this too. So, you know, I think that gives us a fighting chance that a lot of our restaurants and bars and so on will be able to secure some of those funds.
Fantastic. All right, guys, we are going to get started. It's 9:03. We've got several people that have logged in to attend. We'll probably be adding some more as we go. But for those of you that don't know me, I am Michelle. I'm the Regional Director at O2 Employment Services. And we are here with Jen Thomas, who is our Director of Business Operations, NHR, and Benefits, and she does everything. We have Todd Jones, who is CEO, President, I mess this up every time, of Shasta EDC, and Jake Mangus, who is CEO and President of Reading Chamber. So Jake, I will let you say a few words.
Okay, thanks, Michelle, and thanks, Jen, for being a part of this and really leading this discussion every year and giving us these updates. And we have to do more than one a year now because of the shifts that are happening so quickly. Really proud of our relationship with O2 Employment Services. You all are such a great partner with us. We touch so many businesses among our organizations, and just grateful to have partners like yourselves to help us with the expertise that you have. The Chamber represents more than 1,000 businesses in the greater Reading area. And for Todd, I'm going to go into the 3 C's. So the 3 C's of the Chamber: we are a convener of leaders and influencers, a catalyst for business growth, and a champion for a stronger community. And we believe that foundationally, a strong business community leads to overall community vitality. And so that is our aim. And I'm pleased to be joined today by Todd Jones, who not only is a good friend, he also serves on the board of the Reading Chamber of Commerce. So we are very closely working together professionally as well. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jake. Yeah, my name is Todd Jones. I'm the president of the Economic Development Corporation. We're a public-private nonprofit here in town. We've been here since the 50s, and we do 4 things, which I'm still working on making sound as classy as the 3 C's, but we do business recruitment into Shasta County, business retention and expansion, which a lot of that is in partnership with O2 Employment Services and the Chamber. We work on airline services, which many people might have not have known until the last 2 months, where we have the Alaska to Seattle flight, as well as the new airline Avelo to Burbank flight starting in just under a month out of Reading. And then we also work with startups. And so in relation to O2 Employment Services, we're really grateful for their support of our organization and many others in our community. And we work kind of on 2 layers for economic development. We work with a lot of startups, scalable startups specifically, people that are looking for equity financing, et cetera. And then we work with larger businesses that are in our primary industries, which are manufacturing and industrial. And O2 covers that whole spectrum. So they're helping people with their first employees and helping with the HR. And a lot of the folks on this call, I think, can benefit from what they're going to talk about today. And then they're working with our larger companies like Knopf Insulation and Shasta Lake. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but I did anyway. It's too late. And they help with staffing for folks like that who have hundreds of employees, and they're always looking for more people to fill those roles. And there's a lot of jobs out there right now available. So I'm just grateful for what they do and the support that they are for our organization and for all of you. And I'm looking forward to learning more myself, because HR is a tricky topic. So thank you so much for having us, and we're proud to be on this call with you all.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, you guys. I want, obviously with O2, many of you know what we do in terms of staffing and recruiting, and then HR for hundreds of local businesses. And our partnership with Shasta EDC and with the Chamber are so critical to that, because all 3 of these organizations are really focused on not just the growth of your business, but the healthy growth of your business and our overall business economy. We do a labor law update for each year with the Chamber and Shasta EDC, and we had that a couple months ago. And we noticed that when we do those labor law updates, that oftentimes it's, we're updating you on laws, but you really have to have a foundation of the basics of HR in order to understand how the complexity of how those laws are changing. And so that's where the need for this webinar came up. And our lovely Jen Thomas, who does all of these webinars for us, because I don't want to do the actual presentation of the actual information. She's so much better at that and actually knows what she's talking about, is always game when we say, hey, why don't you present on this? So for those of you that are not familiar with Jen, she has an extensive experience in business operations, HR, benefits, everything that it takes to successfully manage your employees within your organization. And rather than get too deep into her bio, I will just tell you she's incredible at what she does. Her knowledge base is extensive. She puts in endless hours of research and reading legislation and interpreting legislation and talking to attorneys about legislation and making sure that our local businesses are set up to successfully employ people and can focus on what they need to focus on, which is running and growing their businesses as opposed to all the different employment issues. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jen because I already reviewed the slides and she's got a lot of information for you guys. If you guys have questions during the presentation, please put them in the Q&A section. We will be answering them as we go, and then we will answer some of them live at the end as well. The webinar is being recorded and we will publish that recording for you guys and send you the slides at the end in addition to that. So Jen, it's all you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's doing fantastic. I'm going to share my screen. So hopefully you can see that. Are we good? Okay, perfect. Just making sure I am on track here. So thank you for having me. Of course, we love partnering with the Reading Chamber and Shasta EDC. Without them, our community wouldn't be what it is. And that is just pure and simple. It is what it is. And we are so thankful and grateful to, especially after this last year, we have endured so much as a community. And I think if any business out there doesn't realize the importance of HR, you do now, because there is just no way that you could have survived this last year without knowing some of these basic things, as well as keeping up on all the legislation that continues to change. So we're kind of bringing it back. We're going to bring it back and we're going to just I'm going to briefly overview HR 101, and it's really difficult to summarize it in even an hour to 2 hour period because there's so much. Every day, everything keeps changing. So I will get started here in just a minute, but I applaud you guys because businesses are, trying to do what they do best. And HR is kind of a side hat that a lot of business owners wear. And it's so important to make sure that you're up to speed on a lot of these things. And if you're not, it's a problem. So thank you for being here today. As everybody said, I'm Jen Thomas and I'm with O2 Employment Services. I've been here 8 years. And when I first started here, I'm just going to share a little bit. I came from an oncology background. I was an administrator for about 20 years. And I thought I knew HR, right? I really thought, oh, I managed a practice. I had a big business. I had all these physicians and staff. Honestly, I knew a fraction. And coming into this environment has grown me so much as an individual. And I love what I do. I love being able to help clients. I love being able to be part of their solution or try to come up with strategic, ideas to help grow their business. And it really gives me an opportunity to dig into the details and the weeds, if you will, of HR and how important it is in our everyday business environment, right? So coming here, I have been blessed with an amazing team. I had no idea what a PEO was. And it took me a good year to really figure that out and understand what it is that we do. And we're an outsourced HR department. That's what we do. We keep businesses compliant and we help them with laws. We help them with onboarding. We help them with terminations. We help them with write-ups. We help with job descriptions, pay, all of the stuff that business owners are like, I don't have time to do. And last year with COVID, I think has exemplified all of that. And so it's been such a wonderful opportunity being involved in that and being a part of the process and helping businesses grow. And that is just the reward at the end of the day. We have an amazing team of payroll specialists, HR specialists. We have, people in specific areas because has anybody done a leave of absence? Holy Toledo. It's not fun and you need people that are specialized, So anyway, I'm going to just take it back and I'm going to go through a brief overview of the 101 basics of HR. And, you know, as Michelle said, if you guys have any questions or anything, put them in the Q&A section, and we'll answer those at the end. And I'm going to give you guys some tools and some takeaway things that you can bring back to your business that I think will be really important. Again, I'm kind of skimming the surface and I'm going to just go over this stuff rather quickly. I know you guys are all busy and, you know, I'm sure this stuff will kind of blow your mind. I am going to do a little bit of an update on a couple of law changes that have happened, especially recently, especially with the COVID leave and the California mandate of the SB 95 ruling that just came out on March 29th. So we're going to talk a little bit about labor law, but most importantly, we're going to talk about HR and how important it is to your business and having a seat at the table. So as a disclaimer, I'm not an attorney. I don't play one on TV and I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn last night. So in the event you have a situation that requires something that's litigious, especially if you're letting go an employee or you have an investigation or you have something, we always recommend legal counsel. We talk to legal counsel all the time. And, you know, we also talk to the labor board. We also talk to OSHA. We talk to a lot of different people to make sure that we're up to speed and that we know the, you know, the latest and greatest. So please make sure that you always have legal counsel, and especially if you're changing policies or you're writing things, it's really important that you make sure you have legal counsel. All right, this is kind of daunting. But this is our agenda today, and I'm not going to go into tons of detail about everything, but I'm going to give you a pretty good overview of what HR does, kind of HR in a box, if you will. We're going to talk about the importance of HR and how important it is to your team. HR deserves a seat at the table, and sometimes that's hard to convince business owners of, but when you realize the legal implications of having employees, you realize kind of how quickly HR is important. We're going to talk a little bit about recruiting and hiring. We're going to talk about orientation and onboarding. So those new employees, how do you make them feel welcome? We're going to talk about HR files and record keeping. It's a big deal and you need to make sure that you're doing it right. Job descriptions, super important. Performance management, training development. How many of you are doing sexual harassment training? You're required to, right? Make sure you're doing it. Handbooks, we'll talk a little bit about those. Employee benefits, how do you retain employees? What's their benefits? What does that look like for them as a long-term employee? Do they have opportunity of growth and getting more benefits and so forth? We're going to talk about pay practices and how important pay is to your employees and, you know, making sure that we keep the economy thriving. Leaves of absence. It's a big topic, and we're going to probably spend a little bit of time here, especially with the CFRA changes that happened in January for California, as well as the COVID leaves that have changed yet again. We're going to talk about safety and risk, your workers' compensation. We're going to talk about disciplinary actions and following it up with separation. Sometimes that happens, so I'm going to try to keep you safe in that. All right, so importance of HR. As you can see, there are a slew of things. A lot of them I already covered in our agenda. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but we're going to talk a lot about these things in the next hour or so about how important. So this is kind of like your hat for HR, and these are all the things under it. It's a big deal. There's a lot of things that are a factor in your business and that HR plays a role in. And if you don't, it could be a problem. So what's our why? Why do we need HR? Well, obviously more employees today are looking for job satisfaction. And if you don't have somebody that can be dedicated to making sure your employees are happy, then you might have a problem because people aren't going to stay if they're not having, fun at work or they're not enjoying their workplace. An employer has a 3-week opportunity to convince an employee to stay. 3 weeks. And so if you don't hit it out of the park in the beginning and really make people feel welcome and explain to them your processes and do the training that's necessary, people are going to move on. And in today's environment, there's not a lot of employees out there. There's a lot of people still taking advantage of the unemployment situation. People just got their stimulus checks. People just got their IRS refunds. And so a lot of people aren't excited to go back to work, which is unfortunate, but it's the reality of what it is. Money still lures workers away, but 50% said that they would take at least a 20% raise to change jobs. I always say that pay is not always everything. If people if they're happy with their environment, if they're not happy, they're going to start looking elsewhere, and pay could become a situation. And the other reason it's super important is that employees today have the internet, right? They have the internet and they go home and they start talking to their spouse, or they talk to their significant others, or they talk to another friend who just maybe got terminated or has a situation with their employer, and they know their rights. They go to the internet, they say, how do I sue my employer? And all of this stuff can come up. They have knowledge and they have access, and it makes it very difficult for employers, right? And so, with employees that are knowledgeable on some of these things, it makes it very challenging to run a business anymore. And it's so important to make sure that you're compliant. We'll get into a number of reasons why employees will sue, and especially the top 5 reasons employees will sue, or the most litigious cases over 2020 that we're starting to see come in. HR basics in a place will help employees in job satisfaction, resulting in customer satisfaction. So when you have happy employees, you have happy customers, right? Because people enjoy their job. They love coming to work. They want to support your business. They believe in what you're doing. And that's a huge piece. If you have employees that are miserable and that aren't in it to win it, it shows. And then we have a huge problem on our hands, because people don't want to come back. They might like your product and they might like what you offer, but if you have nasty employees or people that are not satisfied, they're not going to keep coming back. They're going to go online. They're going to go outside of the area, and we want to retain them. We want to keep them here. Customer service is the #1 factor in your business. And so happy employees, kind of like happy wife, happy life. Happy employees, happy customers, all right? So, and really, bottom line is your HR department is to keep you out of trouble. You're not always going to like what we have to say. And I'm going to tell you, our clients go, Jennifer, I don't like that at all. And I'm like, I know, I understand, but I'm going to give you the rules. We're going to figure out something that meets in the middle, and so that we can make sure we keep you successful and we keep you compliant and keep you out of any litigious situation that possibly could arise. And bottom line, by doing the right thing, you're usually going to be okay. I can't guarantee that, but most of the time, if you're doing the right thing and you're really trying and you're engaged with your staff, it's going to be okay. All right. So one of the biggest things is compliance. And you need to have somebody that knows what compliance and rules and regulations you're supposed to be following. This is just kind of a list of all of the organizations out there that have a hand in the pot of potential litigious situations. We've got Cal OSHA and OSHA that come out and they're looking at safety, and they want to make sure employees are safe. Do you know your regulations? Do you have somebody in charge of that? Wage and hour laws. I know everybody loves California and it's a beautiful place to live, but we have very strict wage and hour rules. Do you know what wage order you are? That's a big one. Specialty industries. Do you do prevailing wage? Do you have, special requirements for those? ADA, the American Disabilities Act. A lot of employers don't even realize what the interactive process is. Super important. FEHA, which is the California Fair Employment and Housing Act. The DFEH, the Department of Fair Employment and Housing. Centers for Disease, the local health departments and California health departments. Every single one of us has been affected by this last year, right? So it goes from the California level, or it goes from CDC, which is a federal level, it goes down to your California health department, and then we have local health department. COVID For those of you that have dealt with that, I'm sure all of you have, they depict a lot of what the rules were. We had to constantly check on every county by county, on what the local health ordinance was. If you don't know what that is, it's a problem. The EEOC, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, they drive a lot. They make it very easy for employees to go online and file a complaint. I'm going to tell you, they make it super simple. Wrongful termination, they've been discriminated against, retaliation, it's a deal. Your employee handbook. I know we're going to talk a little bit about this later on, but you know, it's not just about sending it to an attorney, having them update it and bring it back and you have employees sign off on it. You have to follow it. I know. You have to read it, you have to understand it, and you have to make sure that you're implementing it, because you can't write employees up if they don't know what's in it or your managers don't. So super important. And are they up to date? If you didn't do it for 2021, you should, because the laws have changed and rules have changed, especially with the CFRA laws. Posters, notices, and brochures. There's a lot out there. There's a lot that are required at the time of hire. The new California rule that just went into effect March 29th, there's a new poster. You have to hang it by your labor law poster. Brochures, there's lots of things that need to be given out if an employee comes to you and tells you that they're pregnant. Did you give them their pamphlet? It's required. So there's some stuff we're going to go over. The leave laws, that's a whole nother beast in and of itself. And especially with the new COVID leaves, those are all considered leaves of absence. We have the CFRA ruling, you know, FEMLA for those that have 50 or more employees. And then your required trainings. Easy day, right? Easy peasy. Yeah, well, it's not. It's a lot. And if you don't have somebody that stays on top of that, it can put you into a world of trouble. So it's really important to understand what laws apply to you, because not necessarily, it depends on the employer size, what laws apply to you. And you should know those, or at least somebody in your organization should. What wage orders apply to your industry? There's like 16, 17 different wage orders in California that, you know, you have to follow. And you might fall under more than one. You know, there's housekeeping, there's, you know, logging, there's construction. There is all kinds of different special rules that fall under these wage orders. And you better have that posted next to your employee, you know, your labor law poster, so that you have it on file in case you get, you know, a surprise inspection. You know, the labor board can come in at any time. They'll want to see your poster. They'll want to see your rules and regulations, probably your, you know, OSHA 300 log. And they're going to want to know what wage order you are. If you don't know, you better find out. How do you keep everybody updated and educated? You know, it's not a one and done. So it's not like you sit there and say, okay, new hire, here you go. And you've been here now 15 years and nobody understands the rules have changed or the laws have changed or your benefits might have changed. You know, you have to train them. You have to educate them, especially your managers. Anybody that is, you know, rolling out your business for you in a managerial level, they need to understand what the rules are. You know, what's their ballpark? You know, what space do they live in? What are the rules? Have you trained them properly? As a business owner, do you have time for all that? No, you probably don't, because you're focused on your business, growing your business. So when you call O2 and say, you know what, I need some help. I need maybe HR help. I need some leave of absence help. I need staffing help. You know, a lot of business owners don't have time for this, and it's a lot. So what happens when you don't? Well, you might be looking at a violation, or you have an employee that's disgruntled, and they're going to come back and they're going to sue you. And I'm going to tell you that wage and hour violations still remain the #1 reason that employees, you know, if they feel slighted in any way or they've had a bad outcome with you, they're going to go down to the wage and hour, you know, to the labor board, and it's very easy for them to file a claim. And the unfortunate thing is that the burden of the proof is on the employer. The employer is the one that has to prove that they didn't provide a meal and rest period, or that they did pay overtime correctly. It's not necessarily the employee has to submit all this information, the employer does. It's a hassle, right? In 2020, the top 5 claims that we're going to see more of is the teleworking employees. All right. Did they have an agreement in place? Did you have something, especially with COVID, everybody was sent home and they're teleworking and now they're at home working away and they've got kids running around and they've got, spouses in the place. Did they take their meal and rest periods, especially for those non-exempt employees, meaning hourly employees? You have your hourly employees that are still getting paid hourly. Did they take their meal and rest periods on time? It's really hard to police that, right? So you make sure it's in your teleworking agreement. Did you reimburse them correctly for reimbursement expenses? It's no longer just cell phone. One of the biggest complaints or the biggest things that we're going to see is employers that didn't reimburse for internet expense. They also talk about, household expense. I know, all the way down to garbage. It's kind of an interesting dynamic, but it's the reality. You're not paying for space in the office anymore. They're working from home. So what expenses did they incur? And it's up to the employer to figure that out and give some reasonable type of reimbursement. I don't have a magic number. So if that's the question, I'm sorry, I don't have the magic number, but cell phone reimbursement's a big one. The leave complaints. All right, so the EPSL or the EFMLA, which is the FFCRA, I know all these acronyms. So this is the Emergency Paid Sick Leave and the Emergency Family Leave Medical Act. All right, so those went into effect last year. And that was put down by the federal government that said, hey, you have to offer this to your employees. You have to do a look back. You have to do a calculation of numbers. And you have to pay an employee if they're out for emergency paid sick leave, meaning they have a COVID-related situation, or their daycare is closed or their school is closed and the employee doesn't have teleworking available. They could have up to 12 weeks off. And if you didn't address those or pay those or look at that, pay practices, you could be in some potential problems with that. Workplace safety. So now that we've reopened and we're getting there, which is super exciting, you also have to make sure you're following the CDC guidelines. Do you have your COVID prevention policy in place? Super important, part of your IIPP program, but it's something you have to have in a business. How am I going to reopen safely? Am I offering PPE? Is there safety in the workplace? Are you requiring masks? If you're not, and you have a disgruntled employee, they're just going to go down and say, my employer's not following the rules. It could be a problem. Discrimination claims and retaliation and whistleblower. So one of the cases that I found was really interesting to me was a company that, basically went through and during COVID, they had to do layoffs, right? Which was typical, unfortunately. And so they laid off some employees and they also took it as an opportunity to, maybe not bring back those stellar employees. They kind of said, hey, their job performance really stunk before COVID hit and I'm not going to bring them back, but I'm going to bring back other employees so that we get business back and open, and I want to make sure that all those good employees come back, but those ones that weren't so good or the top performers, I'm not going to bring back. Well, be very, very careful with that because that can lead to a huge litigation situation because are you retaliating against them? You're bringing others back, but you didn't, and you're classifying it as a layoff. Layoff means that you're going to do it for a period of time and you're going to bring those employees back. If you start picking and choosing, it's a huge deal. And so I caution you and make sure that you talk to legal counsel in the event that you decide not to bring employees back once you reopen. Just something to keep in mind. All right, recruiting and hiring. So probably the lifeline of your business, right? You need good people. And like Michelle and stated earlier, there's not a lot of employees out there. So it's really challenging to do any type of recruiting and hiring right now. So it makes it even more imperative that you're doing it right. And you want to hire the right people and ask the right questions and still stay legal. It's all of the above, right? So in your recruiting and hiring practices, do you do it directly or do you go through an agency? It's where O2 staffing is really helpful because sometimes they do the vetting. Well, they do the vetting process for you. They interview the candidates. They try to make sure they have the basic skills that you need. If you're going to use your HR department, which is totally fine, you just want to make sure you're doing the same thing, that you're, getting the resumes and reviewing them and making sure that you have good quality candidates to bring in, especially if you're introducing to a team and so forth, and making sure you have the right people in the right place. What kind of advertising methods are you using? Is it compliant? I mean, you have to be very careful about what you're hiring for, and some of the buzzwords, you know, in those advertisements are important. You know, there's attorneys out there that look at all kinds of job postings to see, are they discriminatory? Are they asking only for males? Are they asking for a certain age group? There's some protected areas that, you know, are okay, but there's some that aren't. You know, are you using social media? Social media is huge, and it's one of those areas that, you know, a lot of people can refer friends of friends, and trying to get people to be inspired, you know, about looking for another job, making sure that they, you know, have a venue of getting a hold of you and knowing what, you know, the position really is, you know, giving them some detail about the jobs. Process of tracking applicants. So there's a lot of software products out there that actually employees can go on. They fill out a, you know, an online application, and you track the applicants kind of through the process, and you kind of can go through and say, oh, their experience matches, and it weeds out the other ones that maybe aren't. There's a lot of different applicant process tracking programs out there. Do you have standard screening questions and interview questions? It's really, really important when you have, you know, interviewees and you're interviewing them, and making sure that you're consistent with your interview questions. You know, sometimes you get really comfortable with a candidate that you're chatting with and you're talking with, and you start asking personal questions like, how many kids do you have? Or, you know, how old are you? You know, there's some no-nos in that, and it's important to make sure that your staff's trained. Sometimes it's just the owners too. They don't know when they get into these conversations, and you go, oh gosh, please don't say that ever again, because that could lead us to a big problem. But making sure you have kind of a set, you know, interview question, you know, policy, and what that looks like. I will tell you that a candidate can sue you as well. Okay, so it's not just an employee that you brought on. A candidate could sue you as well, because they might feel like they were very qualified for the job, and they'll want to know why they weren't chosen for the position. And then it becomes your burden as an employer or a possible hiring, you know, business that has to prove why you chose the other candidate that you did, and it can become a problem. Do you always fill out applications? So I caution you guys, if you're having employees fill out applications prior to interviewing them, because there's a lot of questions that you need to steer clear of. Ban the box went in a couple years ago. There's also a wage history ban. So you can't say, so how much were you making in your previous position as far as your salary goes? You can ask them maybe what they expect to make moving forward with you. You also can't ask about criminal conviction before you interview them, or you do it as part of the conditional offer. So you have to be very careful with that. And like I said, there's a lot of attorneys out there that will go through the process pretending like they're an employee to see what you're asking. And is it legal? If you bring on an employee, or you're going to do this, making sure that you have reference checks. You know, I think it's really important in today's age to make sure that you check references. There's not a lot of questions you can ask, and I know it makes it very difficult, but it's important to understand, are they eligible for rehire? If they're not, it could be a flag for you. You know, if they said they worked someplace for a certain length of time and that doesn't jive, it could be a red flag for you. So make sure that you have an authorization, though, to gain those reference checks. They might list them on their resume, but you need to give them a form that they fill out so that they're authorizing it. So do you require additional screenings? A lot of companies want to have a drug screen in place, as well as background checks, especially if you have somebody in bookkeeping, or somebody that's going to be handling your money, or you're in a retail environment where you have a lot of product that, you know, you're going to be moving in and out of the business. You know, is there a background? Does the employee have a charge of theft, or a felony charge for stealing or burglary or something of that nature? You probably want to know that ahead of time, because the last thing you want to do is have a negligent hire too. That's a real thing. And if you hired somebody knowing you had these things and something happens, potentially it could put you at risk. Do you have a hiring approval process? Or do you offer an offer letter? So a lot of times clients will have employees that you have a very specific offer letter that outlines their job duties, what their salary will be or their wage, what their benefits they're entitled to. Doesn't mean you necessarily have to, but it kind of clearly states what you expect from the employee from the beginning, which is very, very important. And I think really important is, what wages are you, using to attract top talent? It's really important to understand what our standard is here, especially in the North State. It's very different from Southern California. We have a lot of people that are moving up from the Bay Area or moving from out of the area, and they have this grandiose idea of what their wage should be, but that might not be accurate with what our standards are here in our geographical area. I put a little link on here. There is, through the EDD, they offer Shasta County, you can do all counties actually. They go back, it starts from 2020. They don't have the most recent update. They usually publish it like halfway through the year for the first quarter of the year. But they do a survey for businesses so that you can get on there and see what other medical receptionists might be making, or physician assistants, or sales associates, or, engineers, bookkeepers. It's a great free resource that you guys can use to kind of look and see what those wages look like. And those are all important things. All right. So you've selected your candidate. You've said, okay, fabulous. They've accepted your job offer. They're super excited to come in, and you bring them on board. You're like, okay, you're going to start on April 21st, and we want you here at 8 a.m. Well, there's nothing worse than bringing in a new employee and not being prepared for it. If you don't have somebody that is welcoming, friendly, getting them kind of the lay of the land of your office, your organization, their desk space, making sure that their phone is programmed, or the copy machine is programmed, or they might have an email. If you don't have those systems set up, how would you feel? You'd feel like, well, geez, I really don't belong here, or I'm not part of the team. And that's your first impression, right? So as an employee, I'd be like, well, geez, that kind of was stinky, and I'm not really excited to be here. And did I make the right choice? Remember, you have 3 weeks to impress this employee, and that's kind of your honeymoon period of getting them to stay. So it's really important to make them feel welcome. We really try to do like a welcome kit, whether that be one of our O2 hats, and we get them a water bottle, and we clean up their desk, and we get them maybe a personalized little welcome plaque that says, we're so excited you're here. And we partner them up with a mentor or somebody that says, hey, they're in charge of your assistants. They're going to help you navigate this process. Did you introduce them to other staff? Making sure that you walked them around, showed them the office, showed them most importantly where the restroom is. Where can they keep their lunch? Do they need to have lunch on site? Do they go off site? Show me the ropes. As well as then you have somebody that sits down and says, okay, here's your new hire paperwork. Because as you can see, there are several required documents. And I really, really, really encourage you to look through and say, do I have all of these required documents? So we've got the I-9, the W-4, the DE-34, which is California withholding, your SDI, PFL, and sexual harassment workers' comp brochures. Those are all required. And they're all free. You can get them online, easy peasy, but you have to have them. Any safety training that they have to have, make sure they have it. Make sure they have a personal physician designation. What are their benefits? Are they going to get benefits? If they're going to get any type of small group plan, or they're going to get, dental vision, make sure they're COBRA notices. We'll talk a little bit about COBRA too later. Your employee notice with their wage. When are they getting paid? Do they know where to pick up their paycheck? How long does direct deposit? Is that work or not work? If they are going to have a commission, did you put it out in writing? It's required. You need to make sure they have it in writing. They know how it's earned, when it's paid, all that good stuff. The lactation accommodation policy, which went into effect a couple years ago. I know it's a little awkward. I've got sometimes some mails that come in and I said, well, I have to review the lactation accommodation policy just in case. I just need you to understand we have one. You know, the other new thing that went into effect with or without COVID was the sexual harassment training. There's the 1 hour and 2 hours. So your supervisors are 2 hours, your new hires are 1 hour. I think we're also getting into a phase where some employees have already had the training. And so you're required to make sure you prove that and that they have a reputable source in which they had the training from, but you're supposed to have that certificate on file. If they don't, or they haven't had it, we recommend you get them trained in the first 30 days. If you have a supervisor that's been with you, took the 1 hour, but you now promoted them, you need to do it within 6 months of promotion. Are there any other on the job training requirements? Those are all really important things. As well as, you know, they're not necessarily required, but it's super important to your new hires to understand what is covered in your employee handbook. I know some businesses go through and they review it with the employee right then and there and say, here's our 40-page document. Let's sit down and let's go through this. You know, sometimes it might be just specific policies that are related to the business that you want to review with them. Anything that's important and that you're going to hold the employee to a standard of, your managers better know it, and you better make sure your employees know it. What are their benefits? How do they earn vacation? What about the paid sick leave that is required by the state of California? That should be, you know, your employees need to know how that's earned. Is it lump sum or is it accrual, or what does that look like? What's your timekeeping practices? Are they going to be entering their time into a time clock? Are they going to be writing it down? Are they going to have to turn it into a supervisor? Make sure that you're clear from the beginning. Direct deposit, how are they getting paid? Most important question out of all employees. They want to know how they're going to get paid. How soon does direct deposit work? Do they have a name badge? Do they have a key that they need to get in the building? Where's the parking? Sometimes people don't know where to park. You come to our business, we have parking all over the place. So we sit down, we say, hey, here's kind of the lay of the land. This is what we do. Any dress code, employees that have a specific dress code environment of what they are required to wear, be clear with them. There's nothing worse than setting an employee up to fail that doesn't end up with a dress code policy that they understand. And then they show up and then they're embarrassed because you talked to them and said, hey, that doesn't follow the dress code. You know, and you know, you can always take a new employee to lunch. There's nothing better than going out to lunch and getting to know somebody on a personal level, and also taking the time out of your schedule saying, hey, you're important to me and I want to take you out. I want to see how your first week was. I want to see how you're enjoying it. What are the areas that you might be having a problem with? Use a checklist. Do you have a checklist that you check off all these documents, making sure you have everything you need? If you get inspected or you have ICE come in, which is an I-9 audit, which is a big deal, you better make sure you have all those records available and readily available. Making sure you do the orientation, but check in with them the first week, the first month, the first 90 days. Do you do a 90-day evaluation? Say, hey, you're doing great in these areas. These are some other areas that I see. Maybe you need a little more training. Having the conversation with the employee early on is going to be tenfold a huge success for your company as well as for the employee. If you're not clear and you just throw them out to the wolves and say it's a sink or swim environment, it's a problem. And employees don't do well and they just don't know what to expect. So, all right, moving along, HR files and record keeping. Does anybody know how long you have to keep an employee's file? My Jeopardy question. How many of you are awake out there? All right, I see a couple of chats. All right, so yeah, really it's 3 years after the employee terminates. 3 years after the employee terminates. So if they've been with you 15 years, you're keeping it for 18 years at least, just for the personnel record. You've got payroll records that are required longer, leave of absences longer. If you have an exposure or a safety, you're looking at 30 years, okay? So it's important to understand, what does that list look like of how long do I have to keep documents? And do I keep everything together? So do you have a personnel file checklist? Make sure that you have a checklist that you go through and that you've collected everything you're required to do, and then anything else. Because I will tell you, when I go to do a write-up or I do, you know, a disciplinary action on an employee, I'm going to go back and say, what policy did they sign off on? Were they notified of this? Did I make sure they had training on it? And then I go through and say, Mr. John Smith, I'm sorry, but I trained you on this date and you're not following the policy. What part of this policy do we not understand? Do you file, does your files maintain the employee's history, and how well does it tell me everything? So in the event you go to the labor board and you need to prove what disciplinary action you took or how many times the employee was notified that there was something they were doing wrong or incorrectly, you want to make sure you kind of lay it out. And I always refer back to medicine. And I always say, if it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. And it doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It's just more difficult to prove. And I will say, any documentation process that you do, you want to make sure that you document it timely. And sometimes it's just handwriting a quick note that says, hey, I spoke to the employee on such and such date. We had this conversation, the employee agreed. It doesn't mean that the employee always has to sign it, but it also means that you at least documented the conversation. Because I will tell you, when all of a sudden you get a labor law or a labor board, you know, wage and hour claim, and they say, oh, I knew nothing about meal and rest periods and I never got one. And you're like, well, it's in our policy, we signed off on it, and your rest breaks are on, you know, you can govern yourself. It's very clear in our policy. And meal periods need to be taken by no later than 4 hours and 59 minutes into your shift if you're a non-exempt employee. It's really, really, really important, especially when you're going to move to termination. I always ask my employers, okay, so what do you have for me? Because I have nothing in their file. You've sent me nothing. I need to make sure that I'm feeling confident about a separation, making sure, do we have enough documentation? Do we have the employees been warned and all that good stuff? All right, do you have a separate file for personnel file and confidential files? Applicant tracking. So again, remember how I said when you're doing new hires and you've got all these applications that come in, you need to keep them, and you keep them in a separate file. Obviously, if it's an application, the employee ends up joining your team, you can keep it with a personnel file. I-9s always should be kept separately. That's a totally separate document in a different location. If they come in and they audit you, you want to hand them the I-9. You don't want to hand them the entire employee file. Workers' compensation claims are kept separately. Any type of investigation, harassment, discrimination, retaliation, anything of that nature, those usually are kept separate. Any EEO data and the benefit information usually is kept separately, because sometimes, well, back in the day, they used to ask for a lot of medical, but if you have like a life insurance and they ask a medical questionnaire, that can't be kept in the file. All right, do you have a policy for retention, records retention, file security, or destruction of files? Obviously, in a personnel file, they've got usually social security numbers on them. You're not going to just throw them in the garbage can and round file them. You're going to shred them. You're going to make sure that, you know, maybe you have them backed up in a server somewhere that's secure, and, you know, you can pull those records out if you need to. All right, moving on to job descriptions. How am I doing on time? Okay, so job descriptions. This is another really key really key document for your employees, because this kind of sets the tone of what you expect, right? This is what I say are the essential functions of the job. These are the things that I'm gonna need you to do day in and day out. There could be some ancillary stuff and some other stuff that you add to the job description, but most importantly is keeping them up to date. And that's probably the worst, most difficult, challenging, because who's got time for that? Well, we do over here at O2, but it's a very difficult task to keep up on the job descriptions, because jobs change all the time, right? Or you have a stellar employee that can take on more and ends up adding duties to their position. So it's important that you have a complete and accurate job description, making sure those are up to date. What you had 10 years ago probably is not relevant today. And it's really important to make sure you go through and ask, you know, I've given you a couple of locations here, websites that you can go to that you can look for job descriptions. They have a pretty detailed, up-to-date, you know, system that you can go in and you can look at what their requirements are, and you know, you can kind of take and pick and choose from some of those, so you're not completely reinventing the wheel, because they're time consuming. Do they contain the necessary elements? The date. Okay, so if it was back in 2002, it's probably not up to date. The FLSA status, meaning are they exempt or non-exempt? What grade, what reporting relationship do they have? Who do they report to? Do they report to the director? Do they report to a manager? Do they supervisor? What's the hierarchy? What's the summary of the job? What's the essential functions, right? What qualifications do they need to have? What work environment are they going to be working in? If they're going to be outside and they have physical demands and they're going to have to lift 25 pounds, they need to know that from the beginning, not after they've started the job. And then they go, oh, I can't lift that. I had no idea that that was a requirement of the job. And do they have any supervisory responsibility? Are you putting them in charge of other people? Do they have that experience? What training might they need? Those are all really important. I will also tell you job descriptions are imperative when you have a medical leave of absence, right? So if you have somebody that goes out on a leave of absence and they're out for 12 weeks and they go back to the doctor, you have to, it's really important to say, hey, here's the job description. Can the employee come back and do all the essential functions of this job? If they can't, then it could be a concern. And then you say, hey, these are the things that I need, and these are the things I hired you for. It's just really important to have those up to date. Sometimes it's important to bring in other staff that are actually doing the job. If you don't do it yourself, sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And you're like, oh, I had no idea you had 400 different things on your list that you do every day. I didn't know you were doing all of those things. How did that happen? And maybe it was fruition from another manager delegating this and that. It's a deal. And so it's always important to ask your staff, plus they feel part of the process, right? You're like, hey, we're recreating, we're trying to redesign this. Help me understand what your job duties are and what you find really relevant and maybe what you don't. Are they doing admin work and they're a high level? That might not be appropriate. You also want to use these job descriptions in a performance management situation. So if you have employees that aren't doing the job, you can pull out the job description they signed off on that you've reviewed with them yearly, maybe at their review, and you start having a performance issue, you can say, hey, we reviewed this and there wasn't a problem with you doing these things. So what's the problem now? Why are we not getting all these tasks done? Why are you not able to complete these in a timely fashion? Well, maybe COVID hit and their whole world has changed. It's really relevant. And what training do you need from them in employee development? You know, I always feel that it's super important to have your staff educated. And that might be in the automotive industry where they take extra classes so that they can become skilled in some department or some level of knowledge of, you know, the chips that go into here and do this and run your car, you know, or you've got an employee who needs maybe a bookkeeping refresher course or something that maybe is going to take them to the next level in an accounting position or a notary. Those are all developments for your employee, and it also helps with retention because you're training them, you're investing in them, and you believe in them. It's really important. Okay. I know I start talking really fast. I'm sorry, you guys. Hopefully we're doing good. Okay. So performance management, again, I spoke about this just a minute ago in the job description. So this is an important place that employees need to know what you expect. And if I don't have a job description, then it's really hard for me to say, well, I didn't know that was my job. I didn't know that I was supposed to do that. So now I'm being graded on something I didn't even know was part of my job. So job descriptions are key because in performance management, you know, you can always bring those babies out and say, hey, you know, we've got this job description that you signed off on. Do you use the introductory period? So most businesses have a 90-day window. And it doesn't mean that you can just terminate within the first 90 days, but it's also an introductory period to kind of see where are my areas of opportunity to help improve, coach, counsel, document the employee. Sometimes you hire the wrong person. They're not the right fit for the job. You're not going to terminate for that reason, but you're going to say, we've coached you, we've counseled you, we gave you additional training. We've kind of hit this early on in the new hire process, so that I don't go 3 years and say, well, they've kind of been a problem since day one. Well, that's a problem because you kept them for 3 years. And I understand It's hard to find employees and it's hard to, have them there, but dead weight is not good either. And you want somebody that is contributing to the business and making it a better place and making your customers feel satisfied. So coaching and counseling are crucial. And I know that every single one of you love to have those conversations. I know you do. It's probably the best part for me because I have a perception when I go into an outside organization from an outside point of view. So I can kind of say, these are the pieces that maybe if we pull these together will help the employee be successful. Sometimes when you're in the thick of it, day in and day out, you're so busy just getting the job done that you're not really focusing on what you can do to help your employees or help them grow. But it's so important that you address this as it happens, not 6 months down the road and say, well, you've been doing this for a long time, maybe the last 2 years. That's a concern because how is anybody supposed to get better? It's like a relationship. If I don't tell my partner that what them chewing with their mouth open, it drives me insane, it's a problem. And it's only going to grate on me even more. And then it's going to make me want to just get one foot out the door and be done with the relationship instead of like trying to repair it and say, these things really drive me crazy, or these things are not going to work for our business. We need to figure out how we can improve this. Do you conduct performance evaluations? Do you have a formal process? Do you do this every year? Do you do this every 90 days? Do you do this? I used to do a fast track every quarter. That would just be the top 3 things, the top 3 things of improvement. And what are our goals? What are we going to set for the next one that we meet? Is there something you want to, master in those next 90 days? Or is there something that you want to get educated on or have an additional training? And by sitting down and having those meetings with your employees are so important. Another performance tool that sometimes we use is a 360 evaluation where you have others in the department evaluate the employee as well, because sometimes our perception is very limited. Now, when you have an employee that works side by side with somebody, they might have a different opinion and they're like, they're a rock star. And I see the things that aren't getting done. And they're going, no, they're actually incredible, but they have 400 other administrative tasks. Did you know they clean the bathrooms too? And that they, took the mail to the mailbox and they do that. There might be a lot of stuff you don't know. And so having staff feedback is always really important as well. Doesn't mean it's a gripe session either, where they sit there and they pick people apart, because that's something we don't want to foster. All right, training and development. This is a super important area, especially in some of your industry specific, environments where there's specific, trainings that go on for, safety, making sure they understand workers' comp and how they report an injury. What's your communication policy? Especially if you have like a HAZCOM situation where you have specialty areas, medical is one of them. There's some other industries that you need to make sure that they know what the process is. Do they know how to reach out to 911? What in the event if we have a situation, do they have the ability to do that? How do you identify your training needs for your employees? Do you ask them? Do you send out a survey? Do you have a performance deficit that you start seeing across the board? You see other employees not really following things. Is that an area of opportunity? I always say sometimes you just have to go back in and you have to ask employees, how is it going? What's going on? Are you feeling successful? If you're not, then maybe we've got an area of opportunity that we need to do some training in. We all know that training is expensive. Training costs money typically, and you're sending an employee away, and maybe it's during the workday and you're still required to pay them. But it might be worth it in the long run because it also makes them feel valued, that you care about them and that you're willing to put in the training because you believe in them and you believe in the success of your business. And it also is going to make a better environment for your clients, your coworkers. And sometimes that can just be personality. Sometimes that can be behavioral. Sometimes, you have specific areas that you need certain training in, but, like sexual harassment. We've also got the mandated reporter. Anybody under the age of 18 that's working for them and they have managers in the workplace or supervisors, there's a mandated reporter training that's now required. I don't know how many of you knew that, but that's new. Do you have policies on who gets trained and is it covered? Like, you know, we have a reimbursement tuition in the event that an employee wants to continue on, such as taking their HR degree, which I did. There was training involved, there's costs associated with that. How long do I have to stay with the company in order to get it 100% forgiven? There's all those kinds of things available. And how much time do you spend on succession planning? It's really, really important, especially if you have an industry that has employees that are high, you know, maybe a little older in age, and I'm not discriminating. I'm just saying you have employees that are maybe nearing the retirement age and you don't have anybody to replace them, you're going to be in a predicament, right? So succession planning is really important, making sure that one, you're training, you're educating, you're bringing that employee up to speed, because that new entry-level employee is never going to match your top performer and your employee who's been with you 35 years. They're just not. They don't have the carnal knowledge to bring to the table what that employee did. So it's important that you spend time succession planning and maybe being able to pair them up and spend time together to really ensure that your business is in good hands in the event that that employee leaves or retirement happens, or they don't come back from a leave of absence. That happens as well. And sometimes that's hard. That's why cross-training is really important as well. All right, so employee handbooks. All right, I know, favorite topic. And this is like the most difficult thing kind of with job descriptions to keep up on. And again, I think I mentioned earlier that, you know, it's not just a one and done, like, oh yeah, I've got an employee handbook here. Let me dust it off and look through it. And oh yeah, it was designed back in 1902. And, you know, let me see, it was on a little typewriter that, you know, the pages are now blank because the ink's gone. The problem. You want to make sure your employee handbooks are up to date, especially if you're going to use them. They're not necessarily required, okay? So you don't have to have one as a requirement as being an employer, but it's a lifeline for you. And especially in the event of today's litigious world, if you don't have a handbook that is up to date and has the most up-to-date information in it, it's not going to fly, and it's going to be very difficult to prove your case. So again, if you have your employee handbooks reviewed, there's a lot of companies out there that you can just fill in some information and it's kind of cookie cutter, and you pay $1,500 for it and you fill in your little information, you print it out and say, yeah, this looks great. Make sure you understand it and you read it, and those policies really reflect what you're doing. Reflect what you're doing. Super, super important. Because it's fine to have a handbook, but if you're not doing what you say you're going to do, it's really like your employees are going to be like, yeah, well, we have an employee handbook, but nobody ever follows it. It's fine. Don't worry about it. We have one just from a legal standpoint. Yeah, probably not a good idea. You're setting yourself up for big time failure. Do you include any of your external policies? So in the handbook, usually there's some required things and there's things that you want to be clear on the policy about, but you might have external policies. Like you might have a separate vacation policy, or you might have 2 different sick leave policies, or you might have a parking policy or a clean desk policy, making sure that your employee knows what those are. Do you incorporate those in your new hire orientation? We always have employees sign up that they've received their handbook and they've acknowledged it. Because when I need to discipline them, I'm going to look back and I'm going to say, well, in section 5.11, we have a code of conduct and your behavior is not reflecting that. And you signed off on it at the beginning of the year because we did a new update. It's just one more piece to kind of help solidify that. And then I print out the policy and I say, here you go. Are we enforcing those policies of the handbook? And do you review them annually or have an attorney review them? They're so legal these days. Like we don't even touch ours. We send ours off. We have ours done for California, Oregon, and Nevada because all 3 different states have different requirements, but we have ours reviewed. And that's a benefit to our clients. Our clients get the most recent up-to-date handbook so that we make sure that our employees and our employers are covered from a compliance standpoint. All right, employee benefits. Some of you might offer employee benefits. I think it's a really important retention factor. I'm the director of insurance services. I obviously came from the medical world, and I also came into our health side of things here. So I'm a huge proponent of health insurance. I know it's stinky and it's super expensive, and it can be a nightmare to deal with. However, that's what I do, and I actually enjoy it. I know I'm a little crazy, but I feel it's really important for your employees to feel valued, and as well as it's a really good retention tool, making sure that they have some type of benefits that are offered with your organization, especially if you want to retain people. And especially if your wages might not be where you want them to be. I know you want to pay everybody $1 million, but you're not always able to do that. So you offer some benefits. There's some mandated benefits that you have to comply with, which is paid, disability leave, your SDI, your PFL, your COBRA, if you're an employee that has COBRA or CalCOBRA. And the Affordable Care Act, 50 full-time equivalents or more, you must comply with the Affordable Care Act. Is your insurance affordable for your employees? Those are required. You don't really have an option. I mean, you do have an option, I suppose, if you want to pay the penalty, but it is a reportable thing, and you're supposed to report it every year. Don't bother me usually the last 2 weeks of February because I'm working rapidly on ACA. Voluntary benefits. There's some great voluntary benefits out there. American Fidelity, Aflac, pet insurance. We have some gym memberships that we offer to employees. It's just another way that you can say thank you, and the employee usually pays 100% of the premium. You get a POP plan in place, meaning you can do some pre-tax deductions. And some of these businesses will just come to you. Legal Shield will come in, meet with your employees, sign them up. You do nothing other than the deduction and pay the bill. And it's just a benefit to your employees, and they feel valued. They feel like, oh, I've got some additional benefits. It's going to maybe persuade if I stay or I leave. Obviously, health insurance is a big one, especially this last year. I think a lot of people have been affected with the health insurance crisis, especially with COVID. Trying to keep those premiums down. I know every year I go in at renewal time and I'm like, I'm so sorry. I wish it was better news. But here's the deal. Your employees are covered, and they're not going to be penalized on their taxes, for their California taxes. Dental and vision are great, very low expensive options that employees can take advantage of. And, they want to get their teeth fixed, and you want them to get their teeth fixed. You want them to take care of themselves. You're promoting that. Maybe open a flex spending account so that your employees have a reimbursement account for non-reimbursed medical expenses. That's just tax savings to them. It's easy for you to administrate. You have a third party do it. It's fabulous. Paid and unpaid leaves. So you could offer some holidays to your employees. Say, hey, I'm going to offer 3. There's not a requirement that you offer holiday pay, but maybe you say we're going to recognize these holidays. Maybe they're unpaid. Make it clear in your policy. Bereavement leave, do you cover any of that? Do you let them take the first 3 days off? Is it paid or unpaid? Jury duty, how does that work? Vacation, do you have a vacation policy? Is it an accrual, lump sum, 1 day, 3 days, 3 years, 5 years? Is there a cap? There's a lot of nuances that go with a vacation. Did you pay it out at the time of termination? We'll talk a little bit about that. PTO, paid time off, not a huge fan of that, only because it's all payable at the time of separation. And a lot of employers like to lump that in with the mandated sick leave. It's kind of a disaster. Not saying you can't do it, you absolutely can. And if you're rolling in it and you want to just go ahead and pay that out, you're absolutely welcome to offer it. Long-term disability, personal and medical leaves, what does that look like when the employee's off? Some of those leaves, the employee is required to do these things. Retirement options. So CalSavers is coming this next July. I think it's 50 or less employees. All employers are going to be required to do the CalSavers, which is promoting savings. I think there's nothing wrong with an employee saving money for their retirement. We want to have people be able to retire and not have to rely on Social Security. By the time I retire, who knows if it'll even be there. But 401ks are super popular. You've got IRAs, simple IRAs that are available that are really low cost for employers to use. Some other benefits might be EAP, flex time, childcare programs, relocation programs, training, social recreational programs, employee discounts. So I know some of the healthcare providers out there, the carriers will actually give like a discount card for prescriptions, or going to, oh, there's a water park down in the Bay Area, one of my clients down there, and they get a discount for sending their employees, you know, and they can go to the water park for 20% off. Those are all benefits for your employees, you know, and you want to make them feel valued and do it. I know they can be expensive, but I think if you outweigh the risk and the retention for your employees, I think it'll be a win-win for you guys. All right, pay practices. I know I'm running out of time. So I know everybody probably does their own payroll and they just love it so much because it's just amazing trying to get those time cards from all the employees and getting people to approve their time, because it's just easy, right? Yeah, I know it's not. Does your payroll system work for you? So do you outsource it? Do you do it yourself? Are you getting the most compliant timekeeping cards in place? Are you having your employees sign up on them? Are they taking their meal periods? Are they taking them on time? Are they taking them after the 5th hour? Are they taking them with, you know, are they waiving their meal period and ending their shift at 6 hours? Are they on an alternative work week schedule? Did they waive their second one? I know, I can go on and on. Anyway, does your payroll company know this? We do, because we do it every day. But nonetheless, it's really important that you make sure that your company does. There's a lot of companies out there and a lot of international companies that you can go to and they do these pay practices and they tell you, yeah, it's fine. Well, they don't know and understand California. California is a whole different ball of wax. So you better hope that they understand that. And a lot of timekeeping systems out there will tell you, oh yeah, it's fine. We totally take care of your timekeeping system, but they don't put in your defined work week and they don't calculate your overtime correctly, or they don't count for the meal and rest periods. It can be a problem. And what you don't know, you don't know. So it's important to ask and interview. Is the payroll staff knowledgeable about California wage and hour rules? We talked about that. Are your supervisors trained? Sometimes, you know, the managers know and the owners know, but the employees don't know, or the managers don't know how to roll it out to the employees. Like, hey, you have to take your lunch 4 hours and 59 minutes into your shift. Why aren't you taking it? And then if they continue to violate that and you keep paying that premium pay, you write them up. We've discussed this on this day, and this day. We're not doing this anymore. If it keeps happening, I'm sorry, we're going to have to separate ways. Like, I'm not going to continue to have this lunch violation when I've told you, and there's no reason you can't take a lunch and you're just making that choice on your own. Making sure your timekeeping methods are compliant and efficient. Are you rounding? Rounding's a deal. There's some new legislation that just came out, I think, from the Supreme Court about rounding, and it, you know, exacts are way better. Rounding can get you into trouble, and if you're going to do rounding, you better make sure you're doing it right and contact an attorney. Are your pay changes documented? You know, oh, I'm giving Brian a raise today. He's going to get 50 cents more an hour. Well, where is it documented? Did they sign off on something that said they were? Make sure that your pay statements are compliant. This is low-lying fruit for attorneys out there, just so you know. An employee goes in to sue because they've been wrongfully terminated, and the attorney says, let me see your pay statement. Let me see what your employer's giving you. There's like 15, 16 things. I can't keep track because now the new California sick leave is required on the pay statement. Are they all on there? Is the right address on there for the employer's business? Is their wage on there? Is their, you know, Social Security blocked out and leave just last one? There's all kinds of requirements. Google it. What's required on a pay statement? It's a deal. All right, pay practices, making sure that you have fair and equitable pay. I mean, obviously this went down a couple years ago, making sure that employees are making the same rates of pay for the same equal jobs. Granted, sometimes there's seniority, sometimes there's different skill sets that offset that a little bit, but are you starting everybody at the same rate? Are you paying appropriately and not giving Sally more because she's cute and she wears skirts on Tuesdays? You know, making sure you're fair. Overtime and double time practices, make sure that you're calculating those correctly, making sure that are you doing comp time? Kind of one of those things we can't do in a public sector or private sector, but in a public sector it might be allowed. Meal and break period compliance. Is your employees exempt or non-exempt? I've talked about this several times in the labor law update. Exemption versus non-exempt. So either you get overtime or you don't. There's some requirements for exempt and it's very narrow, and you better make sure that you're paying them correctly and they've got the right amount. A lot of lawsuits come out of saying, well, I was hired and this is what my job was, and I was given this salary and I never got overtime and I worked 80 hours a week and I really was doing the same job as everybody else. Did they meet the exemption? They probably didn't. And then you're going to be paying all that overtime, even though you paid them a salary at a certain threshold. Be careful of those. Alternative work week agreements. There's a required process. I mean, employers want to be more flexible nowadays, and they're offering an alternative work week, maybe a 980 or 410s. There's a process. You have to write to the state and tell them, hey, we voted. This is what we got. This is what the employees agreed to. It's an anonymous vote. I don't have to pay them overtime now if they're working 10-hour shifts 4 days a week. So make sure you have those in writing. Make sure that you have requested those from the state. Making sure call-in and reporting time pay is available to them. So if they have reporting time pay, you're terminating somebody and you're going to have them show up, you need to pay them for it. I know it's double-edged, but nonetheless, reporting time pay, usually up to 4 hours or half of their shift that they're scheduled for. Make-up time, do you offer this in your business? Travel time, are you paying travel time at a different rate of pay? You better make sure your employees know it. Piece rate, piece rate's kind of a deal. But anyway, piece rate is something in there that you pay employees for a certain piece. There's a lot of requirements around that, especially from a meal and rest period. You have to pay them for some of those times. Commission pay implications and lump sum bonuses are another pay practice that you better make sure that your payroll provider can handle for you. Because if a commission was earned over a certain period of time, it actually applies to the overtime rules during that time in which it was earned. So payroll usually goes back and they have to calculate those hours because it might bump up their overtime pay. I know, it's no good deed goes unpunished, as one of my doctors used to say. Final paychecks, making sure you have their final pay at the time of separation, or did they leave you 72 hours? Independent contractor, whole nother ball game. I get it. All right, leave of absence. I'm going to rip through this as quickly as I can. So leave of absence is one of those things that's super difficult. It's one of those things that's very time consuming. It's very paper oriented because there's lots of documents that need to be done and you have to document your interactive process. And when did the employee let you know? And if the employee just said it in passing, well, they didn't really ask for a leave. Well, you're wrong. If you knew that they were taking time off because they're going to be out for a surgery, then they're really requesting a leave, and it's on the employer. And so you have to make sure, okay, did they have leave available? Did they meet the requirements? Did I go through the whole process? How long is the employee going to be off? Is it paid or unpaid? Do you have a paid leave policy? Some do, some say no, whatever the state does, or I will allow you to take your vacation time for that first week waiting period for disability to kick in. Do accruals still accrue while the employee's off? Very big thing, because you don't realize it till you're like, I had that first leave of absence and I just gave an employee an accrual the entire time they were off, even though they weren't working. It's a deal. Check your policies. How do you return to work? Is there a notice required? What do we have to do to get them back to work? Are they fit for work? Can I require an examination? Does their doctor have to sign off? All of those things are important. Do you handle your leaves consistently? I always say what you do for one, you do for them all. I mean, sometimes situations are a little different, but is it high level? Is it low level? What's your consistent policy been? Did you give them all the required documents? Like I said, there's lots. So if this slide doesn't blow your mind, I don't know what will, because these are all the leave of absences in the good old state of California. Some are federal, some are state required. But these are all the leave of absences your employees can request. I know, you're welcome. I know, it's awesome. Anyway, it's a lot. It's a lot. We have a person here dedicated to leave of absence, and really it could be a two-person job. It's a lot. And, you know, every time employees request, you know, they are bonding, now employees, spouses can take off, especially if they're working in the same company, they can take up to 24, it's nuts. And trying to track that and make sure, because there's nothing worse than an employee going out on a leave of absence and then the employer says, oh, they didn't come back to work, I'm terminating them because they didn't do this. Well, hold on to your knickers, because that's probably not the best case. And leave of absences and just saying I'm going to terminate them while they're off. Legal counsel, I'm telling you right now. Disability is one of the biggest lawsuits out there, and discrimination because they now have a disability. Big deal. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about CFRA. I know I'm at 2022. I'm trying to get through this stuff. I know I probably lost half of you and you're going, holy mother of goodness, how do I get a hold of Jennifer and see how I can get some help? But CFRA changed. So this was the California law that changed January 1. And I'm not going to go into this a whole lot because I know your eyes will cross and everybody's like, oh my gosh. And I talked a little bit about this in my labor law update, but CFRA provides 12 weeks of job protected leave during a 12-month period for eligible employees for certain qualifying reasons. An eligible employee has to have been employed with you for at least a year. Okay, so that's kind of a saving grace. A new employee doesn't come in and say, oh, by the way, I'm taking off. And they say, oh, well, okay. So they have to be with you for at least a year. It doesn't mean that the employee that was with you for 90 days doesn't get the time off. Is it protected? That's the question. So to qualify for a protected leave, the employee has to be off for at least a year, and they've had to have worked at least 1,250 hours, very similar to FMLA. So that used to be for employers with 50 or more employees. Well, CFRA came in and said, hey, employers with 5 or more employees, you now have to offer this leave. Yeah. Five employees or more, 12 weeks of protected time off, meaning that the employer must hold the position for the employee. So there's a qualifying reason is the care for one's own serious health condition, care for a family member with a serious health condition. This could be bonding for birth or a birth of a child or placement of a child through a foster care or an adoption agency. So this leave also runs concurrently with a workers' compensation leave under the federal family and medical leave. So if you're an employer with 50 or more employees, in addition to the leave under the California Pregnancy Disability Leave Law. So when I say concurrently, this is why I say it's so important. You have an employee that maybe has been with you for 2 years, worked over 1,300 hours, and has been with you and ends up with a workers' comp injury that ends up out for a length of time. The workers' comp carrier or doctor comes back, says, hey, it's going to be off. It's really important that you designate that leave as part of their CFRA leave, right? Because the reason being is the employee is going to be off. You designate it as CFRA. You give them the required documents as well as the workers' comp documents. They're off for 12 weeks. You've then exhausted that leave for a 12-month period. If you don't, you have a workers' comp claim and they're out for 12 weeks, and then they come back and then they need to have a rotator cuff surgery for some reason, non-work related, completely different from their work comp injury. They now could request another 12 weeks off, and then it becomes protected because you didn't run them concurrently. I know. So making sure that you designate these leaves is really, really, really important. Healthcare benefits must be maintained during the leave under the FMLA, the PDL, and the CFRA. So that means if they have health benefits or there's other benefits, just as if they were working, you need to continue those. All right. CFRA, it applies to the private sector of employers with 5 or more. Previously, it was required 50. Now it's 5. So it eliminated that radius of 75-mile radius with 50 or more employees. So some businesses had businesses all over California and Oregon, wherever. It eliminated that in California. So now we don't have that threshold to say, well, that business is 110 miles away. We don't have to combine those employees. Oh, yeah, you do. It eliminates the ability for employers who employ both parents of a child to limit bonding time to a leave of a collective 12 weeks. So you used to be able to say, yeah, I know both of you work for me, but you're not taking off each the time, you know. CFRA changed that. So now employees can take up to 12 weeks of bonding time each. So it eliminates the key employee exception for the right to reinstatement under CFRA, creates more deviation from the FEMLA. So there's a couple of things that FEMLA, if you have 50 or more, and the CFRA, running them concurrently, just kind of like I explained the workers' comp situation, is really important. Because again, if an employee went out for a leave request for a CFRA, which the requirements as far as what you can take the time off for is a little different than what FEMLA says, you want to make sure you run them both at the same time if you can, because if you don't and they come back with a FEMLA situation that's different from this leave, then they can get another 12 weeks off of protected time. It's a deal. All right. Okay, I'm going to go briefly into the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. I know that a lot of you maybe you were required to do the FFCRA last year, right? Which was the emergency paid sick leave and the emergency FMLA leave that the employees got time off for 6 different reasons. Based on the federal guidelines, it said you can get up to 80 hours, or if you have FMLA, you can get an additional 10 weeks off at 2/3 pay, blah, blah, blah. The FFCRA came out and said it basically sunsetted December 31st of 2020. Okay, so January 1 rolls around, everybody's like, what do we do? What's going on? Well, employers could continue to do it if they wanted to. They didn't have to continue doing it, but if you did, you could still get the tax credit. So a lot of employers said, heck yeah, I want to make sure my employees are taken care of and they come back to work and they're not bringing COVID to work, because I also had that Cal OSHA rule. Cal OSHA has sunset March 30th, so they're kind of out of the picture from a COVID pay standpoint, because they were really in the picture. And I know everybody's probably cross-eyed at this point, but Cal OSHA was in the arena with wage and hour, and there was some responsibilities on employers. If they excluded employees from the workplace, they had to continue to pay them. So anyway, the FFCRA basically said, hey, we're going to continue offering the tax credit. This was part of our president's new bill, the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. And basically it says, hey, effective April 1st, we're going to make sure that employees get a new bank of hours if they're going to continue offering the FFCRA. Again, so it's still kind of voluntary, but you do get the tax credit if you do offer it. So a lot of employers are choosing to do it. And they can do it month by month, and you don't have to say, I'm doing it for the rest of the year, I'm doing it through September. You can kind of choose. However, just make sure you're not being discriminatory, because Joe, who's your favorite employee, you give it to, and then Sally comes in, who's maybe a low performer, you don't give it to. It could be a problem. All right, so the other thing that this act enacted was basically that it gave a few more COVID-19 vaccine related reasons why an employee can miss work. So before there were 6, there's now 9. So if an employee gets a vaccination and they need time off for that, they can use this leave for that. If they had a reaction to the vaccine, they can now take that time off as well. The other piece of this American Rescue Plan Act is that now COBRA and CalCOBRA subsidies are available to employees that were either reduced hours, either whether the employee chose to, the employer chose to, or they had an involuntary termination and you offered benefits. Okay, so you have to offer a small group plan or a group plan of health insurance. COBRA is now responsible for the employer to pay 100% of that subsidy from April 1st through September 30th. I know. There's a model notice. I've given that to you guys further down the road. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, but if you have more questions on it, give me a call. I'm happy to kind of go over it, because it's a whole nother racket. Anyway, the Senate Bill 95. So this also went into effect back on March 29th, and this is a California law, okay? This is for all employers that have 25, really it's 26 or more employees, but if you have more than 25 employees, you're required to pay this leave. Required, okay? They get up to 80 hours of COVID-19 supplemental paid sick leave effective March 29th. So as of March 29th, employers are required to pay this to employees. It can also be retroactive. So if your employees ask and say, well, I was off in February because I had a COVID related leave, I now can be paid for that. They're right. So you need to make sure that you have good policies in place and make sure that you have some documentation, or the employee requests it. They don't have to request it in writing. We usually have them fill out a form just so that it kind of certifies their time frame in which they're asking for. Again, the California law also included the 3 additional vaccine reasons why they could take the time off. There's also a rate calculation, are slightly different. Of course they are. So the federal law has a different calculation versus California. It's really important if you're going to run so you can run the California law with the federal law so that you can get the federal tax credit. but California is a little more benefit rich. So you need to make sure you pay the higher of the two. And sometimes there's a true up, especially if you already paid the FFCRA. I know. So that's why your payroll company is imperative, as well as whoever's doing your calculations for you, trying to figure out that time for the employee. All right, employers are required to post a new notice. So there's a notice that is required, even for your remote workers. You have to email it to them. They have to make sure that they know this is available to them. This is also required on your pay stubs. Make sure your payroll companies, if you're doing it internally, it has to be listed on the pay stub. Remember those violations I talked about the pay stubs? This would be one of them eventually. Maybe not just, they'll give you maybe a grace period, but it's coming. All right. No, that was a lot. All right, so safety and risk. Obviously, getting back to a little bit of the HR 101, making sure that your employees know the requirements of OSHA. OSHA regulates your work site safety, making sure your employees are safe, it's compliant, they're not put in jeopardy, you're maintaining a safe workspace, whether that's outside, inside, ergonomics at the desk, making sure that you have your OSHA 300 logs, making sure you have industry-specific trainings and regulations. You know, how do you guys handle injuries? Somebody gets hurt on the job, do you have packets already pre-made? Does the employees know who your medical network provider is? Your MPN, is it listed on your poster, your labor law poster? It better be. Your employees better know how to get and seek treatment in the event that they need to, and they need to understand the program and the process. Who handles that in your office? Do you just turn it into the receptionist, or do you turn it into your HR professional or the business owner? Make sure you have those processes in place. Making sure that you have a return to work program. I mean, obviously that's really important to your business, and maybe they can't come back and do the job they were once doing for you, but maybe there's clerical that they can do because the doctor says they need to sit behind a desk all day now instead of being out in the field. Well, you might be able to accommodate that. Then you don't have this wage loss. It's a deal. So making sure that you understand what that return to work process looks like. Again, kind of back to leave of absences, making sure you kind of keep an eye on that and making sure, should I be running this at the same time with the workers' comp, and am I constantly engaged in the interactive process? And the interactive process doesn't mean that I'm harassing the employee and calling them every week, like, when you coming back to work, what's going on, what's your latest medical status? Yeah, I can't do that while they're on leave. But you can check in periodically and take a temperature, see how they're doing, where things are at. Are you engaging in a medical note with the office saying, yes, here's my job description, this is what I need the employee to do. Am I good to bring them back to work? And if they say yes, they absolutely can do all those jobs, you know, but the employee is saying it's different, then you have a situation where you have to talk to the employee and say what's going on. Do you instill a safety culture? Are there incentives? You know, a lot of employers say, hey, you go so many days without an injury, you guys get a free lunch, or I'm going to take you to Board and Brush and you're going to do something amazing and build something as a team building incentive, or you get a $50 gift certificate to Rayleigh's, you know, whatnot. Check with your CPA though first and make sure it's okay. But do you instill the safety culture? It's important to make sure that your employees are safe and that they all have that safety focus in mind, because you're only as good as your employees, and you can't be every place every time and run the business like you would. Not always employees feel the same way, but you want to instill that culture in them. All right, discipline. Our favorite topic, because everybody just loves to discipline somebody. And I don't say discipline in the fun sense. It really isn't. It's a tough part. However, it's imperative. It's imperative that you have the tough conversations. And if you need help having the tough conversations, call me, call my team. Like, we'll help you walk through some of that, because we've done a lot of them and they're not easy, and not everybody's cut out to have those conversations, and they're tough and they stink, and sometimes they're a little difficult to have, but they're super, super important, because it also helps you gain understanding of what's going on and why the employee's doing what they're doing, or maybe you don't. Usually you find out some family stuff going on, it's why they're late every day. Whether you can help that or not, you might not be able to. And you say, well, the expectation is, it's very clear in our policy that you have to be to work at 8 o'clock. You have to unlock the doors. And if you're not able to do that, then we have a situation. We're going to have to talk about that. Making sure you document them, I think, is really important. Again, even if you scribble down something, there's nothing worse than going back and saying, oh yeah, I've talked to him 15 times. Well, I don't have one piece of documentation. So what days, when did you do it? What did you say? What was the outcome? It's important. It's also really important to make sure you clearly communicate that you need to see a change in behavior, or you need to see a change in their work performance, or you need to see a target being met. Be very clear. It's really important. And it's also important to communicate properly with the employee. Sometimes you have to have a witness in there because they get aggressive, they get hostile, they're angry, they're upset, they're frustrated for some reason. Maybe you don't want to do it alone. Maybe you shouldn't do it alone. You know, make sure you follow up on it. You don't want to just say, oh, I've had this big conversation and I'm never going to talk to him again. And then a year later, the same problem occurs and you go, okay, that's it. I'm terminated you. We had this talk. Well, you never followed up and you never said, hey, it's still happening. What are you doing? What's going on? You know, I care about you. You're a great team member. You do such a good job, but these things are not okay. You know, and did you discuss the next process or next level of discipline? Okay, so you've warned them twice now. What's the third time? Is it termination? Be clear. I always say, hey, you know, if we have this conversation again, we really won't be having the conversation again, because at this point, I've warned you enough times that we're going to have to terminate, or we're going to have to separate ways. I'm very clear about it. I'm very sensitive about it. I don't just come out and say, hey, you're fired, you're fired, you're fired, you're fired. If, you know, they continue to do it, I'm going to handle it in a way that I'm recognizing and understanding the body language of the person receiving the information and making sure that they're hearing what I'm saying. And I would say, can you repeat back to me what we just discussed? I want to make sure we're on the same page. I want to make sure you understand the severity of what we're talking about. I know those conversations are tough, but they're imperative, because if you don't, then usually employers call and say, I'm terminating, I'm out, they're out of here. And it's like, well, okay, well, what do you got? So the first thing, anytime you're worried about a separation and, you know, it comes up, and this is the worst part of our job. Like, I hate doing separations because, you know, you always feel bad. I don't care who you are, you feel bad. I always remember that the employee has usually done something or has invoked something or hasn't performed, or there's some reason it wasn't me that created this. As long as I've continued to coach and educate and guide the employee to success, then I'm like, you know, we've had this conversation. We've had it 15 times. I can't do it anymore. I told you the last time we were going to speak about this, it would be separation. So as with any separation, you always want to make sure that you check your level of risk. And sometimes this means consulting an attorney and saying, hey, what are my levels of risk? And sometimes they might say they're really high and you still go for it and you take that risk, or they're really low and you're like, okay, then I feel comfortable about separating. But usually when we talk about levels of risk, we're also saying, gosh, have I given everybody meal and rest periods? Are they in a protected class? Are they, you know, over 40? Are they female? Are they pregnant? Are they on a leave of absence? Yeah, disability, pregnancy is a disability. They're on a leave of absence. It's protected. So you want to make sure that you give all those details to anybody that's assisting you with a termination, because if you leave some of those details out, it can make or break the case, and then you end up in a lawsuit, and that's what you don't want to do. So if you decide to separate and you have all the final incidents, and, you know, because you're going to get an EDD claim if they go and file unemployment, you might want to contest it, you might not. You know, have you done everything that you need to do? What happened? What was the final incident? And, you know, you bring the employee in and you have a notice that says, hey, we're separating ways with you today. I always say keep separation short and sweet. You don't need to belabor it. You don't need to cry. You don't need to go into this whole dissertation about every piece of the puzzle. You need to say the most recent incident of this happened on this day, and we're going to have to separate ways with you. It's uncomfortable. Don't make it any longer than it needs to be, but make sure you have your EDD, change in relationship, and the EDD for your benefit. That's required. Your HIP notice, as well as any COBRA or CalCOBRA information. CalCOBRA, like our third-party administrator, ends up going out and they send all of our COBRA information, or your small group carrier might do your CalCOBRA. Making sure they have their final paycheck. If you're going to terminate somebody, you want to make sure that it's in hand and you hand that to them. I always have them open it up, make sure their hours are correct. always guesstimate how many hours they're going to be with you even after you've terminated them. I mean, usually they're not going back to work, but if you've separated with them and you need them to go clean out their office, and it's going to take them an hour and somebody's going to be with them, you're going to pay them for that time. If it's a resignation with notice and they give it to you in advance and say, hey, this day is going to be my last day, you still want to pay them on their last day worked. And you want to make sure you pay them for the full day. And it makes it a little tough because that you don't know sometimes how many hours they're going to end up working. I always say overestimate, not under. And if you underestimate and they are owed more, pay them right away. But make sure you give them on their last day unless the employee quits without notice. So that's 72 hours notice that the employee walks out of the job or they don't show up for 3 no-call, no-shows and they're now out. Do you have in writing that you can send them their check in the mail, or is there direct deposit available, or did the employee request direct deposit because they're moving or something of that nature? You want to make sure that you have those things in writing. But final pay is important because if you don't do the check, they'll go to the labor board and the labor board will penalize you for every day that you don't get them their check. And that might be because you think you can pay them in the next pay period. You're wrong. You can't. You pay them on their last day. It's really important. All right, separations after 4/1. I spoke a little bit about this earlier regarding COBRA and CalCOBRA requirements. I know it's a little tough of a pill to swallow because it's involuntary terminations or separations with an employee. So the employee you terminated for some reason, maybe not gross misconduct, but now you're paying their COBRA payment. Yeah, you are. And so there's some things that your third-party administrator is going to be mailing out to your employees, and it actually goes back 18 months because those employees almost 18 months ago, if they didn't elect coverage, they now can. It's kind of like a free pass. I know, I tell you, I bring all the best news. But the model notices have been released from the Department of Labor. If you do your own administration for your federal COBRA, you use a third-party administrator, they're going to send those out based on all the ones that I've seen anyway that I work with. I've also seen a notice from Blue Shield of California that said they're going to be sending out any CalCOBRA. So those are 19 or less employees with a business and they have a small group plan, they'll send out the CalCOBRA notice. There's a tax credit for this. So you pay it, and the federal government's going to give you a tax credit for this. I'm not sure exactly what that looks like other than I believe it's going to be on the 941s and you're going to have to say, hey, I paid this premium. I've put a link in here as well for the Department of Labor for the federal notice. That is the model notice. There's a couple others in there as well. So if you're around on the site, you can kind of read more about it. Whew, we made it. I know. I'm sorry, guys. It's a lot. There's a lot of information and there's a lot to cover. Again, reach out. We've been very involved with the community since COVID hit, even before COVID hit, but nonetheless, we wanted to support our community so much. So just some of my final thoughts. I mean, obviously, one of the quotes that I love is choose a job you love and you'll never have to work a day in your life, which is true. I love what I do and I don't feel like I have a job. I feel like I have an opportunity to help shift and change and inspire people's lives and help other employers do just that. And so if you have employees that love that and do that, they're going to be your best example for your business and continue to help you grow and have your best interest at heart. And they treat the business like it's your own. So a couple of things just from a perspective of trying to retain employees, especially in this tough work environment right now and trying to get employees back to work. You know, employees who like their boss, coworkers, and feel appreciated will usually stay with you and they'll have those conversations with you if they need more pay or they need things. But they also will leave on good terms and they usually won't sue you. It's kind of like a doctor. If they love the doctor and the doctor has great bedside manner and makes a mistake, and a patient's less likely to sue. And that's the same with employers. But if you're a jerk of a boss or you have jerk staff, your employees aren't going to be happy and they're going to find a way to retaliate. And that's usually going to go to the labor board. Some other ideas to consider is being flexible with hours and schedules, especially now. We have a lot of schools that are reopening, kids structure, like we've made a lot of different changes within our own business. You know, we understand remote work works, you know, we realized Zoom works. I mean, nobody was on Zoom prior to, and I'd say, let's do a webinar. They're like, you're out of your mind. I want you in person. I want to see you. I love in person too, because I can't see anybody. Work-life balance is really important to make sure you inspire that to your employees, making sure, and if they see you working like a dog all the time, then they think that's expected. So make sure you look at that. Minimize the amount of internal meetings. Meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting is not productive, and it's a waste of time in a lot of ways. So be concise, be to the point, make their time matter. If you say it's going to be an hour, keep it an hour. Once a month, once a month. Rotate premier parking spots. Maybe you have an employee of the month. Make sure if employees feel engaged in that process. How strict is your dress code? Do you have name tags? Do you make employees feel special by having their own business card or having a name tag? Do you have to be so strict on your dress code? Maybe they want a more relaxed environment. That isn't always the case. I get it. Or maybe they have uniforms and you launder them, and that's not an option. Offer feedback. Make sure you keep your door open. Always be listening. Don't bury your head in the sand. That's the one thing that I think is the worst, especially with your leaders in the organization. You can't bury your head. Like sometimes you have to have those tough conversations, and you have to be able to really listen. And that's hard because you already have some response that you want to formulate and you spew out, but you need to really listen and try to understand and say, what I hear you say is this, and this. Is that what you mean? And they go, well, no, that's not really what I mean, but this is. So sometimes just listening is really important, and offering feedback. Maybe it's interacting with another employee. They're not getting along. Inspect what you expect. If you're an owner and you're a business manager or you're a leader, you have to inspect sometimes what you expect instead of it coming to a head. And then you're like, oh my gosh. And then I think, oh my gosh, but I never inspected what they were doing. So why is this really all their fault? I have some ownership in that too. And try to trust more. It's hard. It's a hard environment, especially for business owners, especially for those employees that maybe have in the past sued you or some things happen that makes you distrust. It's really hard, but most people really want to do a good job for you and work really hard for you. And when they know that you trust them, they're going to walk to the ends of the earth for you, and they're going to want to uphold your business and make sure that they're representing you really well. So that is all that I have for today. I know that was not very much, and I am sure that everybody's sound asleep and either that or they're all headed to the bar because they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea it encompassed all that. But again, this is our team, our amazing team of payroll and HR and our managers and staffing and our administrative assistants. Today's Administrative Assistant Day. Happy Administrative Day to everybody. Make sure you reward them, take them to lunch, especially if you forgot. We can't do it without each other, and that is for sure. So I'm so thankful for this team and thankful for all of you. Thank you for joining us today. I see maybe there's a couple of questions up there, and we'll let Michelle take it away.
All right. Well, thank you guys for staying on. Never underestimate Jen's ability to talk for 2 hours without taking a breath. It is an amazing talent that she has, and we will continue to utilize it. We have a couple questions that were answered directly, but Jen, one is, if the lactation policy is in their handbook as an employer, are they required to actually go over it with them? Or if it is in there and they review it when the situation occurs, is that acceptable?
I would say make sure that the employee knows it's available to them. So if you review the handbook, you're safe. We keep it separately and have it as a separate policy. And the reason being is because the employees get the handbook and they read through it and acknowledge it. But I want to make sure they really understand that, especially from our perspective. It is required, though, that it's reviewed. You just have to make sure you have one.
Okay. Perfect. So that is the only question that we had
The
to
only
answer
one?
live.
Okay.
Thank you guys all so much for your time. We greatly appreciate it. Contact information is on this last slide. We will be sending out a link to the video and the slides. Thank you to Shasta EDC and the Chamber for their continued partnership and support of local businesses as well. And again, if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us, or if there's webinars that you guys want to see in the future that you think would be beneficial to your business or others, please let us know because we're more than happy to put these on. And thank you, everyone. Enjoy the beautiful weather. Welcome to Wednesday. You are halfway through the week, and we will see you soon.
Awesome. Thank you.